Alright, what's going on, guys? I'm going to be going over curve types in Provo mouse accel in this video. I'm going to be covering it kind of in depth and what exactly each curve can do, how to make them, all of that sort of thing. I have about 2 years, maybe honestly more like 3 or 4 years if I'm counting some of the curve work that I used in from the Zim, which was an adapter I used in on the Xbox. It was an adapter for the mouse and keyboard back in the day when console didn't have support for mouse and key. And if for whatever reason you happen to be in that small percentage of people that is switching over from Xbox and you use the Zim with some sort of curve or something like that on there, then this is going to be a really good video for you. It's also a good video for people that use acceleration anyways. If you're a purist, like when it comes to aim and you only believe that there's only one type of way to aim, and that's with set lower DPI, set in-game sense, all that stuff, that's fine, but this video is probably not for you. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to assume that you have already downloaded the Provo mouse accel driver and are somewhat familiar with it. This isn't going to be like a beginner video. There's a great video already by Kovacs, I believe. One of the guys that had influence with the program already on how to set it up and install it and all that. I'll probably link the guide on how to install it and all that stuff at some point on screen or in the comment section or something like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and assume that you're a little bit familiar with like how acceleration works, just the general idea of it, and that you already have Provo mouse accel driver downloaded and you probably messed around with it a little bit or something like that. This isn't going to be for a vast majority of people, but like I said, if you're a weirdo like me and you kind of like acceleration, then this is a really good, this is going to be a good guide for you. A quick backstory on how this driver came to be is that back in the day, Quake Live had a menu similar to this one, and it's kind of where this kind of started, where someone figured out that, hey, acceleration is actually good as long as we can set parameters for it, and that's where you can develop your muscle memory and all that stuff. So basically this is the menu here for the acceleration, and we'll just go over some of the what I would say more of the basic curves, and we'll talk a little bit about acceleration. The couple of numbers that I don't really touch the sensitivity or the speed cap or pre-scale. I pretty much only mess with a post-scale. To start out, if I have a baseline sensitivity that I use without acceleration, what I will do is I'll just go ahead and put this acceleration to 0, and I'll preview it and then save changes. And then what we have here on this graph is just a line, just a straight line, and it's just a sensitivity with no acceleration, right? So then I will go in game to whatever game that is that I'm playing, and I will try to match these two numbers right here to whatever sensitivity I had before I add acceleration. In my experience, what I would do, let's say your in-game sensitivity is like mine. Let's say it's a 1.5. Well, I know that 1.5 on this, on the X and Y, anytime you change this number here, you want to change this number here. And I know that my sensitivity is 5. With no acceleration, I can go into the game and I'm going to do a 360. It's going to be the exact same as if I didn't have this program up. If that makes sense. I'll just go ahead and put this number to 0 too for right now. Doesn't really matter because there's no acceleration, so the driver's not going to do anything. That's how I start. If you don't have a baseline already for in-game, that's basically how you do it. You literally just go in here and you just put whatever, if your sensitivity is 9, you just change both of these to 9 and then preview and then save. And now your sensitivity in-game is going to be a little bit higher, and you can just test out your 360 and see if it's the same. So once you have that figured out there, this is where it gets kind of complicated, and this is where we get into just how intricate the Provo Hats mouse accel driver is, and just how much you can do with it, because you can do a lot. So let's say your baseline sensitivity you figured out in game is 9.9, right? You know what? Before we get into that, let's do something else. Let's just cover a recoil trick really quick before we get into any of this stuff. So if I'm not a fan of doing this method, but I'll just go ahead and add it in here because it is one of the things that you can do. Is you can make your recoil a little bit lower in a way, not really, but you can do it this way. I used to do this on the Zim sometimes when I didn't know any better. You could change this, the Y, which is your up and down, which is basically like when you control recoil, is like when you move down, right? So you could set this higher to like, let's say like 1.2. So now your X, which is your this right here, back and forth, horizontal, and then now your post scale is Y, so this is up and down. This is going to be faster. So this, in a way, this makes recoil a lot easier, and I'll show you how that works right now. Okay, so now that I'm in the game here, I'm just going to show you on Apex. This is the game that I play the most, and it's where most of my videos are. So basically when you change this, the Y, like if you increase it, like if you just watch my mouse, it negates how far you actually have to pull down to negate recoil. So instead of pulling down, like maybe let's say you have to pull down this much, this is especially harder for lower sense players, because basically the lower your sensitivity, the higher the recoil feels like to pull down. So if you're a high sense player, you can probably just, you probably don't really notice recoil too much. So that is one of the tricks that Provo Hats mouse accel can do. I don't know if a lot of mouse drivers have it these days, but some do come. I think like my Razer Ultimate, I believe it comes with an X and Y ratio for DPI, and you can do the same thing on there. I don't like it because you're playing on two different sensitivities. Basically, this will feel like you're having to like pull too hard, and then when you go to shoot down or aim up and down, it'll feel like it's the right sensitivity, and then this will feel like really weird. So if you are having trouble with recoil, though, I mean, it is something you can try. I don't use it, but it is a nice little trick that you can use. Okay, now that I've gotten the recoil trick out of the way, so I'm just gonna go ahead and set this back down to 9, and this is where it gets a little more complicated, and I'm just gonna start out with one of the basic curves first. I think by default this comes with the accel mode by Quake Live. This is the one that I started out with using originally. So one of the curves I used for a really long time was I just put 0 for acceleration, 0.01, and I hit preview, save changes, and that is pretty much it. Now the only problem is with this curve is that basically it's the same as putting on it is turning on acceleration in game, because this curve here, it just goes out into infinity. There is no stopping it. It feels kind of nice, and it's a low acceleration, like there's very, very little acceleration. But the problem is when if you move your hand or if you flick your hand fast enough, it's going to spin out. It's literally just going to spin into infinity. So uh, there's no set parameter on it. It's just a sensitivity, like a starting sensitivity, which is 9 right here, 9 and then acceleration, and it just literally goes to literally as fast as you can move your hand. It'll go to that speed. So that's not really very good in my opinion. So a really good baseline to start out with would be on this sensitivity cap, would be to put it maybe like 1.3. And what this does on the sensitivity cap is it means that this acceleration, see, here's our old curve. Here's our old curve, and now here's our new one. You see how it's capped right there? It doesn't go into infinity anymore. It's curved right here. It levels out. So it doesn't just go into infinity. So what this does, this just multiplies your sensitivity. So now, whenever you move your hand, even as fast as you can move your hand, it's only going to go 1.3 times what your sensitivity is, based off of how fast you move your mouse. So this is a curve that I used for a really, really long time. A side note to this is, whenever I first started, I think I was using 400 DPI, and that's because I didn't read the guide, and the guide talks about it, and it basically recommends that you use 800 DPI, and it's for so that the software can read more of the input of the mouse and make it a little bit smoother and a little more accurate. So that's something I'd recommend doing. Just right here in the configuration wizard, you can set it up. You just click on it, put in your your polling rate, and then your DPI level right there. Just a side note there for you. So this is, in my opinion, this is a very simple curve to use. It's probably one you should probably start out on. The sensitivity jump is not that high. It's only 1.3 times what your normal sensitivity is. You'll notice that kind of slingshot effect that you have whenever you put it on, especially if you've never used acceleration before. I found that if you use higher, like basically the lower your sensitivity cap is and the higher your acceleration is, like if I were to put 2 right here and you put save changes, well, then it shoots to the moon right away. It shoots all the way to the highest sensitivity, your 1.3x times what your sensitivity is, very, very quickly. I found if your sensitivity cap is not that high, then I wouldn't put a lot of acceleration on it, if that makes sense, just in my opinion. Because you want it to be kind of a smooth transition into different sensitivities. You don't want to go from necessarily 0 to 100 miles an hour right away, because tracking becomes very, very hard. Now, if you play, I'd say like COD or maybe even Valorant, where there's a lot of flicking and not necessarily like a lot of tracking per se, then maybe you could work with something like that. Just in my opinion, though, overall, I just don't think that putting a lot of acceleration on a lower sensitivity cap is very good. The only time that I have found that putting a lot of acceleration is when you're doing something really drastic. Sometimes putting let's go ahead and load one of these that I have saved here. Let's do the power curve one. Let's do this. Now I won't explain the power curve part of it, how you see how it's curved like this. We won't explain that just yet. I'm just going to go over when it's good to use more acceleration. So you see my sensitivity, how low it is right here. So this is 3. It means my starting sensitivity is extremely low. Now that's really good because I want to be able to flick to what I'm getting, like, or I want to be able to track like what I'm shooting at. So a lower sensitivity is usually good for that, right? But the problem is, because the sensitivity is so low, I would literally have to move my mouse from like one side of my mouse pad all the way to the other just to do almost a full 180. So that's too much arm work for me, and I'm just not going to do it. So what I do is an offset here is I just put 0.06 acceleration. So which means it has what I mean by that is that the curve itself I'll accelerate faster out of that lower sensitivity than I normally would. On you see my sensitivity cap, it's all the way up to 4 because I have such a low sensitivity. So I'm going to show you what this curve looks like right now in game. So with this low sensitivity as my starting point, this is like on my mouse pad here. I'm going to try and move my crosshair. Look how much I'm having to move. I'm barely moving it. And I am all the way to the left side of my mouse pad right now. All the way off camera and everything. All the way. And that's the only distance I've turned. Now, when I flick fast, I've reset and I've actually overshot my 360 right there, and I only used half of my mouse pad. So that's one of the reasons why you would use a higher acceleration, in my opinion, is if your starting sensitivity is really low. Less acceleration right here if your sensitivity cap is lower. If your sensitivity cap is higher and your sensitivity is lower, then I would raise your acceleration. Now I don't think in the entire time that I've ever used this program, I don't believe I have ever used this number here, 1.0, and simply for the fact the acceleration is just too fast. It's literally just so fast. Like if you look, I mean, it's crazy how high it goes. So I've always used a point something for acceleration. So now that is what's called the linear curve with a sensitivity cap. That's what we just went over right there. Now I'm going to talk about a linear, and what I mean by linear is that it is 1-to-1. It's always the same. It's a straight line basically. If this graph is throwing you off, just don't worry about it. It's kind of hard to understand because I thought whenever I was learning this that a straight line should be a straight line, like straight across right here, but that's not what it represents. The straight line is actually right here. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about a linear curve with an offset. That's this right here. The offset, in my opinion, probably if you've messed around with this for a while and you've tried to find an offset for it, it's really difficult to find an offset. And the reason why is because let's use the number of, let's say 10. We do preview, don't change anything else. Okay. Okay, here's our curve. All right. This is just to navigate the graph, by the way. Like if you put numbers and you don't see anything on screen, you can just plus or minus over here, plus or minus to go up and down. It doesn't change any of this. It doesn't change your curve. I forgot to mention that, and that's something that whenever I first started using this, I got like super paranoid about, because I was like, oh, I hit a plus on here, did I change something? And you don't. It's just to navigate the graph itself. Okay. So this is a linear curve with an offset. Now all an offset does, it just means that the acceleration to this number here, the sensitivity cap, it's not actually going to take effect until you move your mouse a certain amount of times. You know, it's kind of like, I think of it like kind of like a polling rate. You're only going to get 10 whatever the correct term is for it. I apologize, I'm butchering the language on this, but it's only going to it's gonna let you move your mouse around a little bit depending on what the number is without it having any accel on it. Then once you hit that number, whatever number that it is that you've set in there, then it's going to take effect. Now, my personal favorite number for this offset is 30. I found that 30 it works in a lot of different games. That's just my opinion. You can play with it and find out, whatever it is that works for you. Just for my sensitivity and all that, 30. In my opinion, that's a good number to start off on, as I'd start out right around there and figure it out, whatever your offset is. Offset is a very difficult way to learn because, the offset is hard because if you're tracking something on a game and then you accidentally go farther than that offset, then you end up missing your target. That's one of the reasons I don't play with an offset on games where I have to do a lot of tracking. I think for COD is actually a really good it's a really good game to play with an offset, because you don't actually have to track for very long. The time to kill is very low, so you can be very flicky, if that makes sense. And I will show you what I mean by that right now. And so this is me moving my mouse just a little bit, like pretty normal. If I needed to track something, wouldn't be that hard. I'm moving my mouse like kind of fairly quickly here. Like if I needed to move from here to here, something like that, it wouldn't be that hard to do. I don't feel a jump. In sensitivity, something like that. I'm gonna run around a little bit. I'm looking behind me, looking on target, looking over here, here. It's not that bad. Now where it kicks in is if I move my mouse really fast. So if I move it and I go past that 30, like, I mean, the flick is insane. Like I'm literally doing a 360 like so fast. I mean, it's, I'm like way overshooting because I'm just using values that just to kind of exaggerate. I doubt I'd probably use a curve like this in a game, but it's just saying like what all you could do. I mean, just literally in a flick. I mean, I'm barely flicking. I'm doing 360. I mean, but I don't have to play like that. I can just move around like this, back and forth, slide. Turn around, all this, but then I need to do 360 or like whatever. I'm way overshooting, but I think that demonstrates the point of what an offset can do for you. Because I'm just walking around fairly normal. Like my mouse, like I'm real comfortable with my mouse here. I'm just running around how I would normally in game. This is one of the reasons why I said that, in my opinion, 30 is a really good place to kind of be, at least for me, because I can still track and I can still kind of like run around and everything, as long as I don't get too crazy on the flick, then there you go. I can still crack and everything. I mean, this feels like a normal sensitivity to me. And except for whenever I start really putting my wrist into it, I'm literally flicking like crazy. Like this, see, there's a 360 and a half. I mean, you get really. So this is just some of the crazy things you can do with, Provo has mouse accel, Alright guys, that's going to be it for the linear curve and the linear curve with an offset. That's all I'm going to cover for this video. In the future videos, I will be covering the power curve and some of the other curves that I've come up with over the years and that I've used. And I appreciate you guys stopping by. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys again real soon.